most recent project in my fish room is a rack of plastic bins that I will use to grow fry. I wanted to make it easier and faster to change water, so this system is designed with a flow-through water changing system. Plastic bins are hard to control the temperature in, so this rack also has under the bin heating. Let's get started with building the rack. Matthew and I built this wooden rack for the bins using the same system of dado joint construction that I use for all my aquarium racks. The first step is measuring the lengths of the boards we need and then cutting them on the miter saw. Okay, you're going to line it up on that line. Now go ahead and mark the board with that pin all the way across the board. Okay, good. That's marked. The second step is measuring out and marking where the dado gaps will be cut into the legs. I cut the dados with a circular saw, and by clamping all the legs together, I can make sure that the cuts go faster and are more even. Okay. The dado cup depth is set to the thickness of the rails. For this rack, I am using 3/4 inch thick fairing strips since the bins do not weigh much and the smaller boards save some space.
See where the blade is?
Yep.
Clearing all the wood out of the dado gaps starts by using the circular saw to make several passes through the area where the wood will be removed. After the cuts have been made, the bulk of the wood is then popped out using a chisel. The last step is using a wood rasp to smooth out all of the burrs and excess wood in the gap. When finished, the rail pieces should fit easily but tightly into the dado cuts. The front and back sides of the rack will be assembled separately. I start by clamping the legs onto the sawhorses and setting them about the length of the rails apart. The rails are attached to the legs by screwing them securely into the dado cuts with drywall screws. It is important to make sure that the end of the rail and the side of the legs are flush. If the dado is wider than the rail, make sure that the rail is pressed firmly into the bottom of the dado gap. Since fairing strips are thin, I drill pilot holes for the screws to prevent the wood from splitting. After all the rails are secure in their dado cuts, I remove the assembled side of the rack and repeat the process on the other piece. Now that both the front and the back of the racks are complete, I can put them together using horizontal spacing boards. The horizontal spacers are pieces of fairing strip cut to the desired depth of the rack. The boards do not bear any weight and only serve to maintain the proper distance between the front and the back. I find that it is easier to drill pilot holes for the screws, insert the screws part way, and then drive them into the ends of the spacers. After all the spacers are attached to one side of the rack, then it is turned around and the other side can be attached to the spacers. The actual assembly of the rack by connecting the two sides by the spacers took place in the fish room, otherwise I would not have been able to get the whole rack down the stairs. Here is the completed framework of rails and legs. You may note that there are some 2x4s in place of the fairing strips as horizontal spacers. That is because I ran out of fairing strip. The size of board really does not matter. The bottoms of flexible plastic bins need more support than the bottoms of a rimmed glass aquarium does, so I installed a 1/4 inch plywood deck to each shelf. I nailed the plywood onto the rails just to keep it from sliding around. The last step in the construction of the rack is gluing down some lattice strips which will act as spacers between the bottom of the bins and the surface of the shelf. Why do I need to do that? I will show you in the next video.